Hello, everybody. I'm Allison Pinkerton, a lecturer in writing and rhetoric, and I am going to introduce the panel today, moderate it also. We have Brian Hutchinson, Hannah West, Rachel Boone, and Paula Campo. Brian's paper is called Michael Vick's Legal Defense. I Was Battling Pokemon. Here's his bio. Brian Hutchinson will graduate in December 2018 with a degree in accounting and a minor in criminal justice. After graduation, Brian plans to work toward completion of a certified public accountant exam. He is also heavily involved and was an officer in the business fraternity Beta Alpha Psi. He hopes to land a job with a Big Four accounting firm upon graduation so he can begin saving money while he applies to law school. Welcome, Brian.
With the increasing popularity of video games, the discussion about protecting what children are exposed to has led to a legislative push to control the availability of violent video games to children, such as requiring individuals to show state-issued identification or have a parent present if they are attempting to purchase a game that had been rated for mature audiences by the Entertainment and Software Regulations Board. Despite these regulations, children are still regularly exposed to violence through video games, even those rated E for everyone, which makes up 70% of the video game market. Even though a majority of all video games available on the market are rated E for everyone, many still contain varying levels of violence. One such example is the extremely popular Pokemon video game franchise, which is critics such as PETA decry. Once you get over how cute and badass these creatures are, you realize the entire premise is centered around fighting Pokemon against each other, like in dogfighting. Although many people may not equate the violence portrayed in video games against animals as equal to violence portrayed to humans, the game is still portraying an act that is currently a felony in all 50 states. This raises the question of how new Pokemon video games are continually able to receive a rating of E for everyone, despite being centered around a crime that has high public disapproval, as shown by the conviction of Michael Vick on dogfighting charges in 2007, which resulted in his suspension from the NFL, a prison sentence, and losing out on advertising contracts in excess of $100 million. The widespread disapproval for Michael Vick over his dogfighting charges raises an interesting dichotomy when you look at the widespread public acceptance of the Pokemon video games, which feature gameplay similar to what Michael Vick was convicted of doing. To investigate this dichotomy, I analyzed the recently released Pokemon Sun and Moon video games, specifically through the theoretical lens of constraints, as presented by Keith Grant Davey. Grant Davey claims that for many years, constraints were viewed strictly as limitations on the rhetor. However, Grant Davey claims that constraints can also be used in a constructive manner, saying that the rhetor harnesses them so as to constrain the audience to take the desired action or point of view. This rhetorical theory can easily be applied to the constraints that are put forward by the ESRB, which is the regulating agency who provides age ratings for all video games. The Pokemon video games must adhere to these constraints in order to maintain an E for everyone rating, something extremely important if you plan on selling your video games to children. The ESRB self-defines itself as a non-profit, self-regulatory body that assigns ratings for video games. These ratings provide concise and objective information about the content in video games, so consumers, especially parents, can make informed choices. Pokemon Sun and Moon received a rating of E for everyone, which means that the content is generally suitable for all ages and may contain minimal cartoon, fantasy, or mild violence. On top of providing an age rating for all video games, the ESRB also includes a content descriptor, which indicates content that may have triggered a particular rating and/or may be of interest or concern. For Pokemon Sun and Moon, the ESRB included the content descriptor of mild cartoon violence, which the ESRB defines as violent actions involving cartoon-like situations and characters, and may include violence where a character is unharmed after the action has been inflicted. And the addition of the term mild is intended to convey low frequency, intensity, or severity. These rating restrictions will provide a basis for me to rhetorically analyze how Pokemon and Moon fit into these rating constraints in order to maintain their reputation of being age-appropriate games for children. To discover how Pokemon video games stay within the bounds of an E for Everyone rating, I analyzed all the cutscenes from the recently released game. I was able to find a YouTube video that had spliced all of the cutscenes together from Pokemon Sun and Moon into one 6.5-hour long video. While going through the video, I used a coding system to track all of the instances of certain types of phrases in order to look for common rhetorical devices and phrases that the game uses to portray animal violence as something lovable and acceptable while maintaining an E for Everyone rating. One of the phrases that I found most common was the emphasis of adventure and friendship that the trainer would make on his journey throughout the game. In addition to language about adventure and friendship, I also discovered a high incidence of phrases that emphasize that without Pokemon, the player would not be as safe from attacks by other wild Pokemon or enemy trainers. This was the most common phrase that I found in the entire game. An example of this is in the beginning of the game where the Pokemon professor explains that without a partner Pokemon to protect you, you would not be able to walk through the tall grass without risking much danger from attacks by other wild Pokemon. There are several instances throughout the game where the trainer protects his Pokemon from being harmed by an enemy's trainer's Pokemon. This helps create the feeling that by catching Pokemon and using them in battle, you are in effect creating a mutually beneficial relationship for both the trainer and Pokemon. By having a partner Pokemon that you have a strong bond with, players of the video games are more likely to believe that the Pokemon are willingly entering battle in order to defend them from the danger that wild Pokemon that is attacking them. Through my research, I also discovered that there was a complete lack of Pokemon dying in the video games. One aspect that is very clear throughout the entire game is the fact that Pokemon only faint after having been defeated in battle, and never die as a result of their injuries, no matter how much stronger the attacking Pokemon is in comparison to the defeated Pokemon. This is another method that the Pokemon Company uses in order to make the battles that trainers force their Pokemon to go through more appropriate for children who may not be mature enough to process the emotions surrounding death. By not having Pokemon die as a result of battle, I believe this helps the Pokemon stay within the E for Everyone constraints presented by the ESRB that allows games to portray violence as long as the violence is low in frequency, intensity, or severity. If you combine the fact that Pokemon never die with the high occurrence of healing phrases, such as the multiple instances where characters in the game can instantly heal up your Pokemon, as well as the fact that there are Pokemon centers in every city, which are buildings that can completely and instantly heal your Pokemon back to full health for free. Pokemon Sun and Moon creates a situation where the pain that Pokemon suffer during battle is neither deadly nor long-term. The fact that Pokemon can so easily be healed helps the games fit into ESRB's stipulation that violence can be shown in E for Everyone games so long as the character is unharmed after the violent action has been inflicted. I believe that by fitting into this constraint put forward by the ESRB, Pokemon video games are able to maintain an age-appropriate rating, as well as further de-emphasize the violence and pain Pokemon go through as something that is temporary, that they are able to create a game that allows players to easily look past the violence and pain they put their Pokemon through during battle. There's also a very high incidence of phrases that emphasize that Pokemon battling actually allowed Pokemon to gain strength from battle. This basically makes Pokemon battling similar to going to the gym and hitting a hard workout that leaves you exhausted, but afterwards makes you stronger after you've gotten the chance to recover. There was also a high incidence of phrases that emphasized the personal empowerment, success, and respect that Pokemon trainers gain as a result of their successful Pokemon battles. The high occurrence of these phrases are used to create a situation that makes the player believe that Pokemon battles are not only necessary for protection, but that they are also necessary if the trainer and their Pokemon want to get stronger and gain respect from their peers. This is very similar to how some people describe the attractions of actual dogfighting, such as this quote I found off of the ASPCA's website that says, "For others, the attraction lies in using the animals as an extension of themselves to fight their battles, for them to demonstrate their strength and prowess." This phrase describes dogfighting, but sounds eerily familiar to what Pokemon trainers battle their Pokemon against other trainers. and is yet another instance of the many parallels between Pokemon battling and dogfighting. It is not surprising that a video game that has such a widespread following as the Pokemon franchise has appeal for a reason. I believe that my research has helped identify some of the reasons why this game has such widespread appeal, which also happens to be the same way that they cover up the animal violence portrayed within the games. By maintaining an E for everyone rating, parents feel comfortable letting their children play games that feature violence, as well as being able to avoid much of the public outcry and disapproval that is rained down on actual instances of animal cruelty, such as the convictions and fall from grace of Michael Vick.
Thanks, Brian. Remember, please, I didn't mention this before, but to hold your applause till the very, very end. Thank you. Our next presenter is Hannah West. Her paper is called What Was Old is the New Fad? Examining the Rhetoric of the Paleo Diet. Here's her bio. Hannah West is currently a sophomore pursuing her BS in Photonic Science and Engineering from the College of Optics and Photonics at UCF. She works in a lab on campus doing research into 3D fabrication at the microscale and characterization of lasers. After graduation, she plans to pursue a graduate degree in photonics or a related field and eventually work for a large company as an engineer. Besides her interest in engineering and light-related science, she has a passion for music and plays clarinet with the UCF Wind Ensemble. Welcome, Hannah.
Hello. Today I will discuss the Paleo diet, a popular diet that involves eating like a caveman and stresses eating meat and vegetables and limiting carbs and processed foods, with the goal of becoming healthier, more fit, and losing weight. Although its effectiveness and health benefits are disputed, the diet has many followers. Examining the rhetoric of the Paleo diet is key to understanding its widespread appeal, as well as the relationship that is created between the authors and the readers of the diet. Diet books and diet websites are genres, and these genres are creating social facts for their readers, or things people believe to be true that affect how the audience sees a situation, whether these facts are accurate or not. The social facts of dieting are created through skillfully crafted rhetoric. The language within the diet genre is used to create a social meaning of the word diet and social facts about the impact of eating or living a certain way. Understanding the most common motivations for weight loss, such as health, appearance, and mood, can help determine why people may be attracted to certain diets or language used in them. When focusing on the language of diets, researchers notice that diet authors create central key words for their diets, but the meaning of these words may change when convenient for the author. Other researchers have found that even well-informed people may be swayed by the extraordinary claims of certain products or diets due to targeted persuasive language, a lack of media or scientific literacy, or their own magical thinking about a product or a diet. In this presentation, I will argue that the paleo diet websites are a genre characterized by a common message and a social relationship between the author and reader, which is created by the rhetoric used and which is influenced by the writer's background. My data collection process consisted of one in-person interview with a dietitian and textual analysis of 4 paleo diet websites and corresponding author bios. The interview with a dietitian involved discussion of common language used in fad diets, such as quick weight loss, and her tone was that of a skeptic. Coding analysis from the paleo websites synthesized with coding analysis from the author's bios yielded several interesting patterns, correlations, and connections. To qualify as a genre, a work must be a form of recognizable, self-reinforcing communication. Paleo websites create a genre because there are recognizable aspects of each site, such as a blog section, links to cookbooks and diet books, and lists of paleo or non-paleo foods. All the sites indicated negative effects of following other diets and at least attempted to demonstrate how science backs the paleo diet. Every website was also selling something. The websites had the same goal of convincing the reader to follow the paleo diet or lifestyle and assist those already committed, typically by convincing them to buy helpful products. Common language used across multiple websites included natural, real, and unprocessed food, as well as specific examples like grass-fed beef, wild-caught seafood, and local organic fruits and vegetables. This aspect of the diet may be a way to appeal to people who are environmentally friendly or skeptical of the processed food industry's practices and chemicals. The words natural and unprocessed also establish continuity from other diets, such as the Atkins diet. Most importantly, all the paleo websites had consistent core messages and language, making them an effective genre that is easily recognizable and persuasive to the reader. The authors of each website varied in terms of their scientific backgrounds and personal experiences with paleo. Some authors were more academically accomplished, such as the author of The Paleo Mom and Dr. Lorraine Cordain. By contrast, Joel Runyon, the author of The Ultimate Paleo Guide, had less academic credentials but owns a company and travels the world running marathons. Other authors had more of a reputation in cooking or writing. An important factor in the persuasive power of any advertisement or article is who is doing the persuading, and the paleo diet's diverse authors are able to appeal to many different audiences. One of the most significant aspects of the rhetoric of the paleo diet websites was tone. Each author used their own distinct tone when discussing the paleo diet, and those differing tones seemed to reflect who the author was in his or her biography. The tone of Dr. Lorraine Cordain's all-inclusive official paleo diet website was primarily informational and involved many credibility appeals, including scientific articles. However, more adept readers may be suspicious of these articles, as many had the same authors, including several by Dr. Lorraine Cordain himself, and others referenced seemed like they barely related to the diet at all. Dr. Cordain's tone and use of academic articles relate to his background of university research and education. The tone of the Paleo Mom had some similar aspects. However, her website is more of a blog than Dr. Cordain's and seemed friendlier. Compared to the other websites, she used the most positive language and had the highest ratio of positive to negative language. Her writing was very methodical. She was quick to explain the benefits of going paleo and then mention the downsides of continuing to follow the standard American diet, or SAD, as she calls it. Unlike the other authors, she does not care about the caveman aspect of the diet. Her perspective and strategy are designed to target people who are skeptics of the diet, while continuing to appeal to a less scientifically oriented crowd with colorful charts and pictures. Her background as both an academic and a mom lead to a friendly, optimistic, and informational tone that effectively creates a relationship with many types of readers. Throughout the blog, she takes on both the role of a teacher and a parent-type figure in the realm of dieting. The Paleo magazine article entitled "What is Paleo?" looked and sounded quite different. The article was short and to the point. Paleo magazine focused on what its authors believed to be the core of the paleo diet, and they did not leave much open for interpretation. The article contained more negative language and rarely used ethos appeals. The confident tone of the article was convincing, but the article lacked some of the evidence required to back up the claims made. This may relate to the fact that many of the authors have published books and are very successful, but none of them have PhDs. The authors created an authoritative relationship over their reader about diets and lifestyle that seemed like it would be useful to sell the reader on ways to find more information, such as a subscription to the Paleo magazine. The Ultimate Paleo Guide was the least academic sounding of all the websites and was written by Joel Runyon, who is more of a fitness guru than an academic. His tone is mostly conversational, and he often poses and then answers his own questions. While including questionable scientific backing for the diet, he makes some problematic claims, such as linking the paleo diet to the food pyramid, which ignores the fact that the food pyramid is an outdated concept. And, in fact, the paleo diet would not follow the food pyramid, and according to a dietitian, is low in calcium and vitamin D and not well balanced. Runyon may subtly scare his reader into following the diet by taking on the guise of a friend with his conversational tone and then sharing urgent-sounding advice. He creates a bond with readers who are into fitness and those who care a little less about science and studies. The academic conversation on diet marketing has previously centered on diet motivations and language used, but tone is a significant factor. From interviewing a dietitian, I can tell that for someone like her, Runyon's tone would not be convincing, but Dr. Ballantyne's might have a better effect. The variety of prominent voices in the paleo conversation expand the potential audience for the diet and must have contributed to its popularity. The findings of my research into the paleo diet suggest that diet authors do try to develop a relationship with their readers, but these relationships depend on who the author is. Paleo diet websites make up a genre and have many similarities, which adds cohesion to their argument. Research into diet marketing is important because many people go on diets, and they should be aware of the persuasive strategies being used so they can look at the diets available more objectively. If dietitian nutritionists and public health advocates want to sell a healthy diet to the public, they should do additional research into the rhetoric of popular diet books and websites and apply the aspects of their rhetoric that worked.
Thank you. Our next presenter is Rachel Boone. Her paper is called A Fatal Divide, Understanding the Rhetorical Disconnect Between Information and Fatalistic Beliefs About Nutrition-Based Cancer Prevention. Here's her bio. Rachel Boone is a sophomore majoring in biomedical sciences. Her fascination with the inner workings of single-celled organisms and her desire to have a positive effect on the world has sparked her interest in research, and she plans to continuing on and getting a doctorate in microbiology once she graduates. She enjoyed writing her paper, A Fatalistic Divide, Understanding the Rhetorical Disconnect Between Information and Fatalistic Beliefs About Nutrition-Based Cancer Prevention, and she hopes that it will inspire others to research and act on similar ideas. Welcome, Rachel.
In 2016, over 1.5 million individuals were newly diagnosed with cancer in America. However, research shows that most types of cancer can be prevented by eating right and having a healthy lifestyle. Despite there being many accessible sources that state this fact, it is very common for individuals to hold fatalistic beliefs concerning cancer, which can include thoughts that almost everything can cause cancer, that it is a matter of luck whether one gets it, that there are too many recommendations as to how to prevent it, and/or general helplessness, confusion, or pessimism about cancer. This disconnect between the information presented and the beliefs of the public prompts questions as to whether the rhetoric used is as effective as it could be. Some writers attribute this disconnect partially to overcommunication of inconsequential information on television news, while others have found that the internet can play a major role in changing the public's perception of cancer in both negative and positive ways. In studying past public health issues such as tobacco use and vehicle safety and how they were improved, researchers have added that the rhetoric used was a major cause of said improvements, and that using similar strategies could improve current public health issues such as the widespread fatalistic beliefs about cancer. While discussions about fatalistic beliefs regarding cancer preventions and studies on how information presented in a correct way could greatly change these beliefs have been taking place, there have been remarkably few conversations as to what exact disconnects regarding nutrition-based cancer prevention exist in the communication happening on the internet. By identifying these failures of communication, steps can then be taken to use more effective rhetoric and thus improve public health. In my research, the rhetoric used in online articles was analyzed in order to distinguish what aspects could be causing the disconnect between the information and public knowledge. I studied this disconnect by conducting a rhetorical analysis of 3 articles concerning nutrition-based cancer prevention. These 3 articles came from the Huffington Post, the American Cancer Society, and Health.com, and they represent 3 different genres. I then conducted a survey which asked the participants to describe their thoughts about those 3 articles and also gauged the participants' current fatalistic beliefs and previous exposure to such articles. I then compared the results of the survey to the analysis. Analyzing the survey, it was evident that the fatalistic beliefs about cancer prevention is a significant problem. It is exemplified by the fact that about half of the participants agreed with the statement that cancer cannot be prevented in the majority of cases. Also commonplace was the underexposure to articles containing prevention information. And even those who do research will still more often than not fail to implement those ideas in their lives. These statistics serve to underline even more the importance of online articles being effective and useful, and how there is much room for improvement. When analyzing the appearance of the articles, I found that the American Cancer Society and Huffington Post articles were very clean and simple. There were not many distracting advertisements or promotions. There were only a few muted colors, and the entirety of the articles were kept on one page, while the Health.com article included many colors, advertisements, and promotions, which made this article harder to read and had a negative effect for the audience. I thus concluded that the audience wants clean, easy, and professional articles to read. The articles that are not this way are not as effective. When studying the logos or the logic used in the articles, I discovered something very unexpected, that even though the American Cancer Society did not cite many statistics or studies compared to the other two articles, it did not suffer in the way of credibility, but gained in way of usage of space. By this I mean it was able to use more guides and tips for the benefit of the reader instead of being caught up in statistics that the average person does not necessarily need to know. The more effective framework of the three articles was the one used in this article. Thus, it is safe to say that the data-centered frameworks are potential contributors to the disconnects between information about nutrition-based cancer prevention and the fatalistic beliefs of the public. Using the surveys, I determined that a major area which many articles may be causing disconnects is the area of ethos or credibility. The lack of credibility for the author, the unprofessional appearance, the contradictory information, and the ambiguous sources of Health.com offer an explanation as to why only about 40% of the survey participants found it to be credible. Huffington Post also contained many of these qualities, and its credibility suffered as well. I have little doubt that the lack of ethos in articles is a significant problem when it comes to the communication of cancer prevention. Other aspects of these articles which are important to analyze are the contradictory and confusing information, the use of guides, and the use of definitions. In this analysis, I discovered that guides and definitions in an article increase the chance that the audience found it useful and helpful. But what was very common in the articles was the occurrence of contradictory or confusing information, which lowered the helpfulness. Since fatalistic beliefs are characterized partially by confusion, this is a major problem. Although this research identifies multiple aspects of nutrition-based cancer prevention communication in online articles, which are causing disconnects between the information provided and the beliefs of the public, there is still much that warrants research in the subject matter. Each aspect which I analyzed in this research could be studied individually. Studies of how different demographics view these types of articles would also add important knowledge to the ongoing conversation. More importantly, the problems identified in this research need to be fixed. Those able to make changes should strive to provide credible, easy to use, applicable nutrition-based cancer prevention websites and articles to decrease the commonality of fatalistic beliefs and thus potentially reduce occurrences of preventable cancers.
Thank you. Our last presenter is Paula Campo. Her paper is called Orlando Strong, How a Tragedy Can Bring a Community Closer Together. Paula Campo is a sophomore studying nursing, hoping to become a neonatal nurse. She's a member of the National Society of Collegiate Scholars and the Association of Pre-Nursing Students. She participates in Nighthon, UCF's largest philanthropic event to support Children's Miracle Network hospitals, and works at the Recreation and Wellness Center on campus. Paula's paper, Orlando Strong, How a Tragedy Can Bring a Community Closer Together, was written in Scott Lanier's ENC 1102 class. Welcome, Paula.
I remember waking up to the news that 49 people were killed and 53 were injured in a mass shooting by one perpetrator. One man who decided to take the lives of innocent people. Although I knew the seriousness of the tragedy, I couldn't comprehend that the mass shooting occurred at a gay nightclub called Pulse in Orlando, Florida. I've lived in Orlando pretty much my whole life, and never would I have thought that my city would be on the cover of millions of headlines because of the location of then the deadliest mass shooting in American history. Obviously, this topic is important as well as sensitive to many, but I hadn't truly realized the repercussion it left on so many people until I was at a friend's house whose brother was a surviving victim of the Pulse tragedy. We were all watching some reality television show, and random loud sounds from a video game playing in the background made him jump, which showed his PTSD from the shooting. This is where I knew that I wanted to help and find out more about the impact of the tragedy. Facing such a tragic incident was hard because although I do not identify myself as part of the LGBTQ+ community, myself, as well as others, knew that they especially needed all the help they could get in this time of sadness and pain. I originally wanted to conduct my research on how I could try to get involved and help the LGBTQ+ community, even after the incident. But there were many difficulties since I couldn't just invite myself into their community and had no connections. I used Orlando, since it encompasses many communities, and found that it was the best way to see how people were affected even months after the shooting. I know there is still heartache and mourning, especially for the victims' families and friends, but I wanted to know how something so horrible could turn into something positive. In other words, how could a tragedy bring a community closer together? So I tried to answer this question with one-on-one interviews and a collective journal. In my interviews, I learned a lot about the effect the Pulse tragedy had on their lives, both personal and professional. Both my interviewers work at UCF in departments that directly saw people that were affected by the shooting, and they both explained how important their jobs were. My first interviewer was a graduate assistant at UCF, working with LGBTQ+ services and the Social Injustice and Advocacy Center, and is a member of the LGBTQ+ community. He explained how there are more services available for the community in which he chose to participate, to help and be there for people who wanted to come and freely discuss their feelings in regards to the tragedy. In terms of how the community came together, he felt like he played a large part in the strengthening of the people. He also explained the importance of focusing on the vigil. Since the tragedy happened so close to home, there was a larger need for it to be done properly and respectfully for the 49 lives lost. He felt that Orlando was broadcast, which made people all around the world feel the pain that was being felt, even if they didn't identify themselves as an LGBTQ+ person. My second interviewer works at UCF Restores, which is a clinical research center at UCF for the study of all types of anxiety, trauma, and post-traumatic stress disorder. When asked what she believed were the most important lessons to be learned from the tragedy, she said supporting one another and acceptance. When faced with such a tragic incident, she felt that it was important that people learn to recognize other people's thoughts and emotions and take them into consideration to help them cope with what they were already dealing with. She also mentioned the importance of the vigil and how quickly people came together to create it. She saw the rest of the community come together as well by supporting the first responders that were directly involved that night. I also created a collective journal of photographs. The photographs were taken throughout the course of 3 months, and they all demonstrated in some way, shape, or form how the community came together after the Pulse tragedy. From making Pulse permanent by getting a tattoo in remembrance of the lives lost, to the Orlando City Soccer Club dedicating a section in their stadium for the Pulse tragedy victims, to actual pictures of the victims and their names displayed at the memorial site, demonstrated how so much thought was put into making sure that although many lives are lost, that they would never be forgotten. All aspects of the community joined as one to commemorate the 49 people. The Orlando community wanted to ensure that its people were still standing tall and proud to be who they were. Although many were in a state of shock and sadness even months after the tragedy, it was necessary to note that the whole community needed love. Within my research, I learned how emotional going to a memorial site could be. At 19 years of age, I've been to one funeral, even though I have lost many important people in my life. Going to the Pulse Memorial site was heartbreaking and truly sobering. I knew going there that it was going to be hard seeing the pictures and things left behind by loved ones, but it wasn't until I got there that I realized how terrible it must have been for these families. I truly learned the meaning of love and compassion by just standing there. I don't think there's another way to truly feel what I felt while I was there. By actually visiting the memorial site, I understood one of my limitations within my research. I find that it was hard to find people that were mentally tough, yet emotional enough to be able to show compassion about the topic, but not feel uncomfortable talking about it. This is why I found that my collective journal added a unique part to my research. While some people mourned, others found the inspiration to make something beautiful. Now their artwork commemorates the lives lost and reminds many others that there will always be love and support for these families. I hope to spark interest within the Orlando community as I try to investigate how a tragedy can bring a community closer together. I hope people begin to wonder how we can stop these hate crimes from happening in the future, whether having to do with government policies or teachings of acceptance, but it's not something that can be done simply or quickly. I believe that learning how to love one another and supporting the community is important after such a tragic incident. But knowing and acknowledging the significance of compassion and kindness prior to terrible events like the Pulse shooting is imperative for our community to be more resilient and accepting of changes and people overall. I don't think that tragic events must happen for people to understand the importance of it, but unfortunately, that has been the case, especially with the Pulse shooting. The LGBTQ+ community and the Orlando community have now had to deal with the terrible reality of a mass shooting, and knowing how it has brought multiple people together, all for one cause, shows the strength a community can have when they want to become united once again. Thank you.
Round of applause, please, for all the presenters. And now it's time for questions. So it looks like there's a microphone set up over there that if you have a question, there's your microphone. And there too. So you could ask a question at either microphone, and we welcome your questions.
I think I can get this working. Here we go. Excellent job to all the presenters. I have a question for Brian. What would you say the catalyst for your research would be? What made you really want to research what you've talked about today?
Well, Professor Ringfield kind of told us to choose something that it doesn't necessarily have to have like the biggest academic value, but if you're interested in it, that'll make it a much more bearable project, which was the truth. The original idea for this project, actually, so I had bought the recent release game. I was playing it myself, you know what I mean? I'm a big video game fan, and while I was playing, I happened to be watching ESPN, and it was the day that Michael Vick had actually retired from the Eagles, but he was also getting like a kind of recognition from the Atlanta Falcons, who were his original team before he was kind of wrapped up in all of this. And I kind of sat there and thought, like, hey, I'm playing this super popular video game that just became the most sold video game in history, and yet here we're celebrating Michael Vick, who got convicted of the exact same thing that I'm playing right now. So that was kind of the original thought process.
Excellent. Thank you.
I have a question for Hannah. My question is, what was your writing process like?
Well, my writing process was pretty much the same process that most students in 1102 go through, you know, starting with finding previous research related. So that was actually pretty difficult because not very many people had done that much research into the rhetoric of diets. There was a lot of research on the science of diets, on the nutrition. I was like, oh, this is great, but this is not what I'm looking for. So I had to really search for things that were related to like the wording of diets, and I ended up going even more towards marketing in general. Then I sort of wrote up the previous research. I did my research. I did my analysis of the 4 websites. And then I sort of just went one by one through the websites, and I sort of found like what was special about each of them. And I wrote that down and sort of organized it, and really wanted to make the big points of what stood out about each paleo website and why people might be convinced by one or another, so that the diet would become popular.
Thanks.
I have a question for maybe each of you to answer really quickly. I know most of the people in the audience are probably Composition 1 and Composition 2 students right now. So is there anything real quick that you guys wish you knew before you got into this, that you have advice that you could impart on these folks as they write their research papers this semester?
I'd say start early. Originally, my question had nothing to do with this, and then while I was doing research, it started changing into what it was now. So if you start early, you'll have like a chance to adjust and make sure you have all the research you need to actually answer your question.
My advice kind of goes along with what she says. Start pretty specific and get more specific. There's a lot of research out there, and I could have kept going for another 20 pages and it still wouldn't have been everything. It was a lot of things. So if you're going to do a paper, right, start early and take time with it, because it's going to be a lot longer than you think.
My advice would be to make sure that your topic really is examining writing and rhetoric. Make sure that that's what you're really truly focused on, and also try to do things in increments. Don't try and say, I'm going to do all my research today, because it's not going to happen. Say, I'm going to do, like, for example, for me, I'm going to look at this website today, I'm going to look at this website 2 days from now. I'm going to do things in small manageable pieces, and then gradually put the whole thing together.
One important thing I think I definitely realized over the semester is that there's so many different types of writing. I think kind of through your entire writing career, you've gone through high school and written research papers and hated it like I did. You know what I mean? It's all the flowery language. There's a lot of that stuff that you've been taught and how to do is way different than what you actually do in this class and what you'll actually end up doing in whatever your career is. For example, I'm an accounting major, and I actually love writing accounting disclosure statements, which is a very technical, focused form of writing, where all through high school, on the other hand, like, I hated writing, I hated English. If my English teacher saw me up here, she'd be like shocked that I even put enough effort to get this award. So it's kind of realizing that writing is so many different things, and you might like certain types of writing more, and just to find that passion to help motivate you as you work through it, because it is a big project.
All right. Thank you, panelists.